I Googled friendly geese interacting with human. And there we go. Look at that. So, of course, we're going to talk about geese tonight. And we're, of course, looking at geese for some wisdom and enlightenment. And this is not the first time that humanity has looked to nature for illustration and wisdom. And there is actually a whole field of science. It's called biomimicry, in which scientists, usually scientists who deny God, will look at nature in order to learn how to do things better. And of course, we know that that's because nature was, in fact, actually designed by the best designer. That's why when you copy the designs from the designer, they're actually pretty good. But a lot of modern scientists don't agree with that, yet the field of biomimicry remains. And this is from the Biomimicry Institute's front page. You read, humanity's biggest challenges, nature's proven solutions. We are the bridge between biology and design, advancing the adoption of nature-inspired strategies to help solve the most pressing problems of our time. So obviously there is something, no matter who you ask, there is something to be learned from nature. And we're going to learn from geese tonight. And we're not the first ones to consult nature either in this century. We even read in the Bible, Solomon directed the sluggard to consider the ant. We read that in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. I don't have a slide for that. That's just for reference. Jesus said to look at the birds and consider the lilies. That was in Matthew chapter 6, 26 through 28. Just a quick mention. But tonight, we'll be learning from geese. I am not a geeseologist, I don't know what that would be. But these facts, I've got 5 goose facts. These come from a man called Robert McNeish, so that's my credit. He's got these online as 5 facts about geese, and tonight we're going to look at how we can use these lessons from the things that geese do to improve our relationships with one another in the church. So our first lesson on geese, the first fact that we have about geese, as each goose flaps its wings, it creates an uplift effect for the birds that follow. So when you see birds flying in a V formation, there's actually a good reason for that. By flying in a V formation, they're all riding each other's uplift, and the whole flock adds about 71% greater flying range than if each bird flew alone. Well, isn't that nice? Well, what can we learn from that? People who share a common direction and sense of community, they can get where they're going quicker and easier because they're traveling on the thrust of one another. And there is a word that describes an interesting process. The word is synergy, and synergy means synergy is when 2 or more agents work together to produce a result that's not obtainable by any of the agents independently. And one example of such is nitrogen and glycerin. And I am confident that most of us have heard of nitroglycerin, and while nitrogen is not particularly eventful and glycerin is not particular, I think that glycerin is actually a lubricant, but by itself it doesn't really do a lot, but I think we would agree that nitroglycerin does in fact do a lot. So that is 2 separate things, 2 separate entities that when combined do a single thing much more effectively. And that kind of explains to us, in a good analogy, why the Bible often mentions the practice of going out 2 by 2. Here's a few scriptures on screen of 2 by 2. In Mark chapter 6, verse 7, he called the 12 to himself and began to send them out 2 by 2, and he gave them the power over unclean spirits. In Luke chapter 10, verse 1, we read, after these things the Lord appointed 70 others also, and sent them out 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself was about to go. Acts 13:2, as they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Spirit said, "Now separate to me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." That's Acts 13:2. And finally, in Ecclesiastes, we have wisdom from the man of wisdom. King Solomon says, "Two are better than one because they have a good or a better reward for their labor." So, do we appreciate that wisdom of flocking together and riding each other's uplift? The second fact about geese that we can learn from is when a goose falls out of formation, it feels the drag and resistance of flying alone. And what happens at that point is the goose is sensible and it quickly moves back into formation to take advantage of that lifting power of the bird immediately in front of it. If we have as much sense as a goose, we stay in formation with those who are headed where we want to go. And where are we going? What is our formation? Well, our formation is the church. Our formation is the church, and where are we going? Well, I hope we're going to Christ. And if the church is going to Christ, then that's a formation that you want to be in. And it's going to be a lot easier for you to get there if you stay in formation. Also, we should be willing to accept the help of others. The birds aren't all prideful, saying, "I'm going to do this myself," flying in a horizontal line so that none of them are benefiting from one another. No, they're flying in a manner that they benefit from one another. And so also, we can work within the community of Christ, we can work in a manner that makes us more effective and efficient in accomplishing our goals here on earth. Strong Christians appreciate the value of mutual edification. We read in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12 through 14. This is kind of on the flip side to all of that. "Beware, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God, but exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of Christ if we hold the beginning of our confidence steadfast to the end." That was Hebrews 3, 12 through 14. And also, on a similar vein, "And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting," or warning one another, "and so much the more as you see the day approaching." That's Hebrews 10, 24 through 25. So we all have gifts, we all have a duty, and we all do better together. And just as the goose that falls out of formation quickly realizes things are getting rough, and he falls back into formation, so also we should make sure that we're staying within formation. And when we are falling out of formation, of course, get back in ASAP, because that's a sensible, easy, efficient thing to do. But also, when our brothers and sisters fall out of formation, that's our time to provide that exhortation that Hebrews is suggesting, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. So that's 2 out of 5 lessons that we can learn from geese. Number 3, we've got diagrams for this one because the geese really know what they're doing. This is something that we know about geese. When the lead goose tires, it will rotate back into the formation and another goose will fly to the point position. Now, these diagrams are not specifically of geese, but these are diagrams of bikers because we, as humans, actually have realized that when the wind is blowing on you and you're behind somebody else, it makes it a little bit easier. Or when you're bicycling and you're cutting the wind, it is easier for another biker right behind you to ride in your wake. What that means is that you're exerting force against the wind as a biker, and you're splitting that wind. The person behind you is benefiting from that, but that's because you're doing the work. So instead of groups of bicyclists picking the strongest man and sticking him at front, they all exercise, they all improve their strength, and then when they get into formation, they rotate. So there's a bunch of diagrams of, I got these off of a bicyclist site, and you'll see that this is a single rotation, there's the double rotation, there's the circular rotation, and then there's the complicated one, which is the echelon crosswind. That's what the bikers call it, the echelon crosswind. And if you look at the geese, you'll notice they don't fly in a straight line, and they don't fly horizontally. They fly in that sideways thing, because the most complicated formation, which is the most beneficial formation in a crosswind, of course, that's the one that they go for. The geese know what they're doing. Geese are pros. And what can we learn from this rotation that the geese do, and that our bicyclist friends have also learned? And here's what we can learn from that. It pays to take turns doing the hard tasks and sharing the leadership. As with geese, people are interdependent on each other's skills, capabilities, arrangement of gifts, our talents, and our resources. We're all interdependent. Everything is together, and we're all working. We all depend on one another. And as members of the body of Christ, we need to do our part. Ephesians 4:16, we read, "From whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective work by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love." Each member of the body, in our own way, we split that wind, we make things easier for the person behind us, and then instead of all of us working hard to make our own wake, we ride on each other's wakes when we can, and we build off of what our brothers and sisters have produced to produce something bigger together. And that brings us to lesson number 4. The geese flying in formation honk to encourage those up front to keep their speed. Now, this is a little bit relative, because modern goose telemetry isn't necessarily where it should be, so we haven't fully deciphered every goose conversation, but we can be confident that they are saying things like, "You're doing a great job, keep it up, you're a good man, fly straight," stuff like that. We're fairly confident. And that's the kind of stuff that geese are saying when they're honking to each other up in the sky. So when next time you're at the beach or somewhere, and the geese are flying over you, and you hear the honk, 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 you'll know what they're saying now. It's all positive encouragement. And what do we learn from that? We learn we need to make sure our honking is encouraging. When you honk, be encouraging. In groups where there is encouragement, if you run a business, you realize that employee morale really is a big contributor to the efficiency of your business. People want to feel good. People want to feel encouraged. And when there's encouragement, we do a better job at whatever we're trying to do. The power of encouragement to build each other up, that is the quality honking that we seek. And that should be the purpose of our words, to build each other up. We read in Ephesians 4:29, "Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers." And Colossians 4:6, "Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." And that brings us to lesson number 5, the 5th thing we learn from geese. And this is a powerful one, one that we really can learn from. And that is that geese care for one another. When a goose gets sick, wounded, or shot down, 2 geese will drop out of formation, 2-ish, and follow it down to help and protect it. And they will stay together until the fallen goose either dies or he flies again. After that, they launch out with another formation. If they can, they catch up with the flock that they departed from. Otherwise, they are a new formation, and they'll pick up more geese along the way. But if we have as much sense as geese, we will stand by our brothers and our sisters in their strong moments. That's easy. But also in their weak moments, when they're shot down. Sometimes we take a shot. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes bad things happen in our lives, and that is the time for our brothers and our sisters to be there. And the Bible speaks of this kind of an attitude. We read in Ecclesiastes 4:10, "For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who, when he is alone and falls, for he has no one to help him up." That's Ecclesiastes 4:10. And in Galatians 6:1, "Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, and consider yourself, lest you also be tempted." So, seems there's a lot to learn from Geese. So to sum that all up, flock together. When you see the V formation in the sky, remember that those geese are working together to get to where they want to go, and they're doing it in the most efficient, most expedient means possible, and that is riding each other's wake. And why do they do it? Because it's easier. It's easier, and when something is easy, it makes sense to do it. Remain steadfast. When you fall out of line, jump back in. When you fall out of the church, realize, jump back in. And when somebody else falls out of the community of Christ, when you see them slipping away, that's the time to provide an exhortation. We remind our brothers and sisters of the benefits of the community of Christ. Share the load. Don't be afraid to let others share your burden. And remember to freely help others when you can. Do your share. We all contribute. We all get where we want to go. Encourage one another. Positive words increase morale, and morale is powerful. We all do better when we feel good. And finally, when someone gets shot down, when difficulties come in life, that's our time to stay with our brethren, help them, never leave a brother or a sister behind. God gave geese instinct, but he gave us his word. By instinct, geese have the wisdom to succeed in their flight and their migrations, but by his word and God's creation, God gives us wisdom to succeed in our spiritual journey. And that concludes our lessons from Geese this evening. But if you have a need, I welcome you to come forward as we stand and we sing our closing song, which is, "We Praise Thee, O God."